Hello world, this is Linden Tibbets, IFTTT Founder and CEO, and thanks for joining for what's going to be a very exciting session today around winning the subscription economy, specifically how Dropbox, Spotify, and Trello use third-party integrations to drive paid subscriptions. We've got a great agenda for you today. Start with the introduction, dive into why subscription services succeed in the first place, talk a little bit about subscriptions as they relate to integrations, and then we'll get to those three strategies. Finally, wrapping up with a little bit of audience Q&A. There's no doubt that over the last decade, there's been an incredible rise in the success of subscription services. The global subscription market is $4 billion today, projected to grow to $7.8 billion in 2025. So over $640 per year is what the average American spent on subscription services. That's up 7% from $598 in 2017. And finally, 34%, or more than a third of Americans say they believe they're going to increase the number of subscription services that they use over the next 2 years. And boy, has that been my experience as an end user. And I think a lot of these numbers aren't even touching on what many people might consider subscriptions or might not. Things like their health insurance or car insurance. I, for one, am actually subscribing to a car now itself. So there's a whole lot out there that may not get labeled as a subscription yet, but our next slide deals with just this. Everything in the world that you pay for today or that you use is very likely going to become a subscription service in the future. This is one of the biggest forces for change in our time. Mark Andreessen, I think, said it really eloquently. Software is eating the world. And I think so much of what software eats becomes a subscription service. And there's all kinds of ways to slice and dice the different types of products that you use today, whether they're physical goods or digital goods, and think about how those can turn into subscriptions. So really, no matter what your business is today, whether you're a subscription-based business, an e-commerce business, or you're selling a physical product and thinking about connecting that product to the internet, you should be thinking about how that business ultimately transforms into a subscription service. The other thing to note, and certainly top of mind for likely everybody here at this session, is that subscription services are actually weathering a lot of the turmoil caused by COVID-19 extremely well. Based on this data, almost or more than 3/4 of businesses are either growing or still seeing growth through the downturn, with only about 11.5% actually seeing churn outpace growth. So regardless of what type of subscription business you might have, you're in a great spot if you're already a subscription business, because there's been a huge rush for all kinds of reasons. More people working at home, more interested in becoming a much more digital organization, so on and so forth. More people watching Netflix. So subscription is a great place to be now and into the future. So what drives subscription conversions? So a little subscription or freemium 101, if you will. Right out of the gate, most services that label themselves freemium generally have conversion rates that may seem really low. They fall somewhere between 2 and 5% on average. That means for only 2 and 5% of the people that sign up for the free version of that product or service end up upgrading to some type of premium subscription. And the way that that upgrade works really can fall into one of 3 buckets. It could be a limitation on features, things that you get or unlock once you become a premium subscriber, usage quotas, limits to the amount you're able to use that product or service until you pay for more, or some additional support options, things that make it easier to use the product or give you more confidence that that product is going to work for you or your business at the right time and place. So we'll talk a lot about these kind of 3 different buckets or 3 different ways to affect those conversions, and specifically how integrations might fall into these 3 buckets. What drives those subscription conversions? So one of the things that you need to keep in mind is that if you have a subscription business and you have any way to offer some part or all of that product for free, you should. services that have some type of freemium offering or free trial consistently outperform services that don't for both NPS and overall retention. And we'll talk about 3 products when we talk about Trello, Dropbox, and Spotify that all have some free version of their paid offering. Integrations are an important part of the value proposition for any service. So when you think about that first bucket, feature limitations or feature upgrades in terms of affecting conversions, what I've seen certainly over the last 3 or 4 years, but over the last 2 years, it's really accelerated. Just about any premium subscription business on the internet today, one of their top 3 or 4 value props on their homepage or on their pricing page often involves integrations of some sort or another, whether that's talking about all the other products and services that they integrate with for your business, all the clients or devices that they integrate with. You know, Strava is top of mind, big Strava fan, all the different types of devices, whether it's a Garmin or a Fitbit that they integrate with. So increasingly, integrations are beginning to be thought of as features. We'll talk a little bit about that more over time, but when you think about positioning your product and the value it provides your customers, begin to think about how integrations fit into that articulation of value. So why do subscription services need an integration strategy? Well, subscription conversions are really driven by user engagement. And that's really the broadest brush we can use to paint a picture for why people are looking to upgrade once they start trying your product. The more they use that product, the more they depend on that product, the more likely they are to upgrade. That sounds simple, and it is, but once you meet reality with that, it often becomes much more complicated, much more confusing as you're making day-to-day product decisions. What we like to think about here at IFT, and what we've seen now play out in the market with so many of our customers, is that integrations often, rather than product features, are the quickest and most efficient way to increase user engagement. So if you've already got a product that's maybe not feature complete, but has some semblance of product market fit, if you have people that are buying your product, upgrading to a premium subscription for your product, one of the easiest ways that you can affect that conversion and get more engagement, get more people to use your product, is to figure out what other products and services in that end user's world you can integrate with. And it has the added side effect or bonus of not bloating your product and not trying to push your product to do too much by adding new features that actually detract from the overall value that your product can offer. So we'll talk a little bit about this last one, about picking a strategy then to help you leverage integrations to meet your specific goals. So right out of the gate, one of the things when you think about integrations is how do you actually get those integrations? Well, there's really 3 broad ways to do it. You can build direct integrations. Basically, your engineering team, your product team, perhaps your business development team is establishing relationships one-to-one with other companies that have some type of developer platform. Now, this approach often is very time and cost intensive. We think it takes about $60,000 to $80,000 for the typical third-party API integration to just get off the ground. And then year over year after that, there's at least 10 to 20K invested in just maintaining that integration or improving that integration. The second approach is to build your own developer platform, and that creates defensibility. The downsides, though, are you've got to have significant market share in a market that other developers, other companies are interested in integrating with. And that's no small task. In fact, we've seen now over the last 5 or 6 years, many of the world's biggest businesses start with a strategy that really relies on their developer platform becoming massively successful and their new connected product or service being a market leader in their market. And what they found when they've fallen short of some of those goals is they've got a great product or business, but it's just not big enough or not critical enough for other developers to invest that time and effort to build for their developer platform. And finally, an alternative that's really only 2 or 3 years old, of which IFT is one, is an integration platform as a service. These services, like IFT, already have scale. They already have many other services on the platform, and they offer greater speed and flexibility to get some of those same integrations done that you might get in some of those other buckets. What we see most often are enterprises mixing and matching, or often investing across all three in different amounts. And no matter how confident you are in either your team's ability to build direct integrations or the success of that developer platform that you're working on, we'd encourage you to take a look at iPaaS solutions, at the very least, to look at that long tail of integrations that you might leverage to get even more value out of that investment. Another quick note on end user clients. They're just integrations. When you build an iOS app or a desktop app, or you integrate with Alexa or Google Assistant, we often think of those as something different, not necessarily integrations, those are apps. And I'd like us to begin to think about those client integrations as really just integrations that involve UI. You're spinning up entire teams, your mobile team, or your web team, or your desktop team, to build these integrations. And the value that your business gets out of it is often very similar, if not the exact same, that you would get out of building additional third-party API-based integrations that may have less or no UI. Frankly, that value is engagement in the first case, and in some cases, distribution, depending on the size of that platform. And a quick note on working with voice. One of the things that we've seen take off over the last 3 or 4 years is voice assistants. And sometimes these voice assistants don't make sense for your product or service, but voice assistants have reached market saturation in the same way that mobile has 10, 15 years ago, with almost 72% of consumers using that voice assistant every day. So again, a voice assistant, just another API integration, but it's another one to think of when you think about deriving more value and getting more premium subscriptions. So without further ado, let's dive into those 3 unique integration strategies across Dropbox, Spotify, and Trello. We'll start with Dropbox. Founded in 2007 as Evenflow. I didn't even know that before doing this session. And they launched as Dropbox in 2009. They've got over 600 million users across 180 countries. And they have a 2.47 conversion rate. So for all of those folks on the call, my sense is that the vast majority of you have signed up and used a Dropbox account. But what's really crazy is only 2 or 3 out of 100 have actually converted into paying subscribers. And they've been massively successful with that. They've been able to use a pricing model that starts free. Those first 2 gigabytes are free. And then you get up to 2 terabytes for $9.99 a month as an individual, or 3 terabytes for $16.58 a month. And these are just the end user plans. They have different professional and enterprise plans that even go beyond this. And you can see they're leveraging what is really a usage-based upsell or conversion subscription model. So that 600, 500 million registered users who receive that 2 gigabytes of free storage, once that capacity is exceeded, once they hit that 2 gigabyte limit, they're offered the option to upgrade. And I think one of the things that Dropbox has done really well is they don't hit you over the head as an individual right out of the gate to get you to upgrade to the premium tiers or the premium offerings. They really rely on usage, making their product incredibly easy to use and sign up for, and depending on people to actually add more data and more things to their Dropbox before they give them the upsell and ask them to upgrade to that premium service. So back to this idea that if there's any way for your product or service to have a free or freemium plan, you should seriously consider that because it allows you to be much more user-friendly right out of the gate, getting people to try your product, getting them hooked on that product, and then getting them to upgrade later on. So Dropbox's integration strategy is, again, a mix of those 3 buckets. They have hundreds of integrations and extensions. Those integrations and extensions not only create additional value for their consumers, but for Dropbox and that usage conversion, so many of those integrations not only drive user engagement, but they actually drive users to store more data and to hit that 2 gigabyte limit where they're presented with the option to upgrade sooner. Dropbox also has a very robust client integration strategy, as you would expect. Mac and Windows desktop app, iOS and Android app. They have things like Smart Sync and a password manager now that they just launched here over the last couple weeks. Those are all different plays to drive additional engagement and usage that ultimately drives conversions to their premium tiers. So Dropbox also works with IFTTT. I mentioned, they have their own developer platform. They also do one-off integrations with their developer team, and they also leverage an iPaaS with IFTTT to do things beyond that. So you look at some of how people are using Dropbox and IFTTT together. The overwhelming largest use case is for social networks. People backing up and saving photos, videos, other files that they might find on Facebook or Twitter or Pinterest to their Dropbox. They've got a robust set of triggers, actions, and queries, things that allow you to watch when new files are added to Dropbox or add new files to Dropbox. And all of those drive additional engagement for that service. What are consumers doing with Dropbox and this specifically? I mentioned social networks as a big use case. They're saving photos they're tagged in from Facebook. They're backing up photos from iOS. They're saving Google Docs or different pieces of Google Docs in other places, or they're backing up things like smart home cameras, Arlo, backing up their recordings to Dropbox through IFTTT. So next up, we'll talk about Spotify. They were also founded around the same time as Dropbox in 2006, 217 million users across almost 80 different countries, and they've got a whopping 29% conversion rate. But that's a little misleading, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. But Spotify not only has an excellent freemium offering, but that freemium offering is also monetizable via ads. And that's just an option that they have given the nature of how their product works. So Spotify pricing, they've got the individual tier for about $10 a month. They've got a family tier that allows you to share that across different family members and kids. And then they've got a student offering that's about half the price. So they've got a lot of different ways to get people to upgrade. And frankly, that key value prop for Spotify to upgrade often involves not necessarily new features, but you could really think of it as a limitation. They allow people to get rid of those ads and get to their music much faster. So Spotify reported that they had, that paid premium subscribers hit over 120 million individuals, and that's a year-over-year increase of 29% from 2018 to 2019, and roughly a 45% ratio between paying users and ad-supported users or freemium users. And Spotify's integration strategy, is also very robust like Dropbox, but really with some different end goals. They've got 14 specific app integrations, and those integrations really help transform Spotify into a centralized hub for music. Things like Waze or Google Maps or Shazam or Tinder. They've also got a very robust and different client integration strategy from Dropbox in that not only do they have Mac, Windows app, iOS, Android app, but they've got to be compatible with just about every place or every hardware device that you might listen to music on, from things like Sonos to your car vehicle or your car dashboard, pardon me. And so I think they're thinking about engagement and really being a part of every situation in which someone thinks music. Spotify has to be compatible with that. And that creates tremendous overhead for their team to maintain all of these client integrations. And so they often farm some of that out to other developers through a very specific API on their developer platform that allows developers to fully integrate Spotify with their music playing device in the same way that Spotify would with their iOS app. So how does Spotify work with IFTTT? So again, they've got also a robust set of triggers, actions, and queries. But so much of it is built around helping users add things to their playlists or manage their playlists or save tracks for later. So a lot of the stickiness that Spotify generates in a market where there's not a whole lot of differentiation between the competitive music subscription services, pretty much everybody has all the songs that most users would want to listen to. They help users actually curate and create a space that's very individualized and personalized to their musical tastes. And once they've done that on Spotify, it makes it very hard for them to go move to another service. And you can argue, and maybe there's a whole other session just about, some of the ethics around that, but it's been an effective tactic used by, thousands of businesses over the years, and users seem to be okay with it. And so a big part of how they're leveraging IFT is to help people add to those playlists or manage those playlists and create a more personalized music listening experience. Again, you see here that social networks are a big part of how people use IFT and Spotify, often saving tracks that they find on Twitter or Facebook or otherwise. People, funny enough, are using IFT and voice assistants quite a bit. And what was really interesting to me is we have a number of other music services on the IFT platform. And so they're looking to integrate Spotify with some of those other music services, again, likely to help Spotify further curate and personalize their music on Spotify itself. What are consumers doing with Spotify and IFT? So they're adding songs from YouTube that they like, they're adding songs from SoundCloud that they like, they're using Google Assistant in a very specific and kind of custom way to add songs to a Spotify playlist, or they're just backing up and kind of keeping track of that Discover Weekly playlist that is very ephemeral. It goes away over time, and they want to make sure they can go back to and listen to some of those songs that are being recommended to them on a weekly basis. So next up is Trello, founded in 2011, acquired by Atlassian in 2017. They've got over 1 million teams and over 35 million users. So again, another hugely successful service. And what they do is also a little bit different. So they've got a permanently free tier that has a limited feature set. So they're upselling people based on an additional set of features. But they also allow people to collaborate with teams. So using it as an individual versus using it as a small team or a large enterprise necessitates an upgrade. But I think what's most interesting to call out about how Trello thinks about subscriptions is they use app integrations as one of those key selling points to get people to go from free to paid. And that's a trend that we've been seeing at IFT and related to third-party integrations more and more now, is that people are looking at integrations as valuable enough to actually put behind that paywall, or put some of them or some certain amount of them behind a paywall as further value to convince people to take that jump from free to paid. And I think this is a great quote from Joel Spolsky, the original founder of Trello. And I think the thing I'll zero in on here is that first line: the friction caused by charging for a product is the biggest impediment to massive growth. And on the internet, that makes complete sense. We've been spoiled, frankly, collectively, for the first decade or two of the internet's development. So much was free. And I think we are just now starting to get used to the fact that the value we get from these things that used to be free is worth paying for, even in some small amounts, not only because you can get more value, you can help those businesses stick around longer, but because people are able to quantify that value. They're able to kind of label that in a way that before they were perhaps only able to do around content, things like movies or articles or music, maybe gigabytes and Dropbox. I think they figured it out pretty early on. But I think that's starting to apply to just about every way that people use the internet or use internet services. And I think that friction is such a key component to thinking about how to get people to upgrade. What's the right amount of friction? What's the right amount of value to put behind some type of paywall or some type of premium service without losing people, or without people thinking that your product isn't good enough to continue to use in some type of free mode or as a free user. So Trello's integration strategy, they've got 100+ integrations that they built either themselves or with their developer platform. They have a thing called Butler automation, kind of similar to IFT and if this and that. And we don't take any offense by that, because we don't claim to help people build automation solutions as much as we claim to help people build integrations. And it enables Trello to bring in other services that in some cases are collaborative in ways that Trello may not be. Things like Slack or Jira, where you already have a pre-baked set of relationships amongst other team members or other people at your company. And it makes Trello more social because of those integrations. And that ties in directly with Trello's subscription model, because a big part of why people upgrade on Trello is to interact with and collaborate with more team members. And Trello also has a robust client integration strategy, but a little bit less than Spotify and Dropbox. You know, they're on the web, they're on Mac and Windows app, and they've got iOS and Android apps, but they don't necessarily have to go beyond that in terms of client integrations, because those are the primary places in which most people get their work done. And so on IFT, they've got some triggers and actions. Queries are coming soon. A lot of those are built around adding things to boards, you know, almost like brainstorming different ideas, different ways to add cards to Trello, or getting notified with or bringing some of those cards into other services to collaborate with them or to stay up to date with changes to what's happening in Trello. I think one of the things to call out here in terms of how users are using Trello with IFT, cloud storage is about a third of those use cases, but they've got a significant number of use cases tied into this category that's about 22% called other. And I think that's where so much value can be derived relative to your integration strategy to working with an iPaaS, because there's this huge long tail, in this case, roughly a fourth of all the things that people are doing with Trello are services that are uniquely diverse, things that don't fit neatly into cloud storage or communication or other task management and to-do apps. So what can consumers do with Trello and IFT? Well, they can create cards with Amazon Alexa, and Trello doesn't have a native Alexa voice skill, so that's a great way for people to leverage that. They can use things like Welltory to basically track all the activities that are happening throughout the day. They can sync their iOS reminders with reminders from Trello, or they can sync their Todoist tasks. It's a much more kind of task-driven, kind of personal to-do list with something that's more collaborative at the team level, like Trello. And so to wrap things up, looking across those three different services and their strategies, all three, Dropbox, Spotify, and Trello, have their own open API platform. And all three of them have really built and owned that market share to enable them to be somewhat successful with that open API. And because of that, they've either had other developers or they built internally themselves numerous direct integrations. In all three cases, over 100 plus. Only Spotify integrates with Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, and then they augment or add to that number of direct integrations with IFT, their iPaaS solution. You know, Dropbox adding over 400 additional integrations, Spotify adding over 300, and Trello as well. And in terms of where they offer those integrations, where can you actually instantiate or enable those integrations? All three of them allow users to do it both on their website or in their mobile apps. And across all three, their categories, things like voice assistant, music, calendars, and scheduling are fairly diverse across those three services. And it really speaks to this idea that often beyond those first 5, 10 integrations that you know your users want, there's this massive long tail of things that you'd be completely surprised with once you give the tools and the power for your end users to build some of those integrations themselves. And so to recap with integrations, I think integrations, just like product features, often have this tendency to get people, especially ambitious, driven folks like product managers and people on your product engineering teams to try to do it all. Instead, what they should be doing is focusing on exactly what you do best. What's that key thing that you do better than anyone else? And so instead of trying to do it all, instead of trying to have your own developer platform, instead of trying to build every single integration that your users are asking for, you should be focusing on what you're doing best and working with others that can handle all those other things. And if you can do that, what you get out the other end of it is a strategy that enables you to be a best in class or best of breed service that has many, many touch points or many, many opportunities for your end users to engage with that product and service because they're engaging with other best of breed products and services. And I think that's really the power of integrations, to drive engagement, to drive usage that ultimately drives upsells. So we think you should be building better integrations, not more product features. Reach your users across all the surface area that exists relative to the things that they're already using that aren't your product, and make your product a deeper part of every one of your users and hopefully premium customers' lives. So thanks. With that, what's next? Would love to encourage folks to check out what we've just launched here at IFT over the last couple of months. Is a single price $199 per year developer plan to get started. We offer additional things that you can do, deeper integrations beyond that, but it's now easier than ever to get started on IFT, and you should be able to get something up and running in a matter of days if you've got a developer on your side or you're a developer yourself. So finally, let's end with a little bit of Q&A. We've got that chat box there. Go ahead and type some things in. Looks like we've already had a couple people that have typed something in ahead of time. Here's a question from somebody that says, a number of brands are now making IFT a part of their premium subscription plan. What do I think about that? And I'd say that, that's just fine. Whether IFT is something you offer users for free or as something that you entice users to upgrade for, we have no problems with that. It's your business. You should be doing what makes your business successful. Now, that said, what we'd encourage businesses to do is something kind of like Trello. Instead of saying that IFT is something you either get for free or that you pay for, instead you should be talking about the integrations that IFT provides. So in the same way that Trello puts those 100 apps and integrations behind their paywall, businesses that leverage IFT can have a very similar, if not exactly the same type of value prop. Because at the end of the day, IFT is just a single integration, but it has hundreds, in fact, over 650 other integrations that make that possible. So pick and choose the other brands that IFT can bring to your service and really talk about those as the value prop instead of IFT. That's what we'd encourage people to do. Second question here is, it seems that integrations are often either feature limitations, things that people can or can't do based on whether they're paying or not, or they're about driving usage quotas, kind of like Dropbox. And the question is anybody doing both? So what I'd say is you're exactly right. If you're someone like Dropbox, you're probably not putting those integrations behind a paywall because you're looking to those integrations to drive usage that in turn drives upgrades. But if you're someone like Trello, those integrations end up being valuable enough that you can put those behind a paywall, and you might have a product that drives enough engagement on its own to convince people to stick around and then get upgraded later on. And I would say that oftentimes things like integrations with clients, building an iOS app or an Android app are integrations that drive a little bit of both. I think there's very few companies that I know out there that have a free service and then ask users to pay to upgrade to download their iOS app or their Android app. And so in many ways, it's really about what's right for your business. And if that integration, like having an iOS app, is really about engagement, well, lowering those barriers, or like Joel said, reducing that friction is going to be a big part of your strategy. So you've always got to be thinking about really the kind of two different levers that you have to get more people to use and pay for your product. You can either increase the value prop, you can increase how valuable your product is or how valuable it's perceived to be, or you can reduce the friction, reduce the barriers to entry. And that's not just price, it's about making it easier to use, easier to understand. And I think toggling between those two and figuring out what's the right balance is going to be one of the keys to your success as a subscription service. Well, excellent. Thank you. That's all we have time for. Really enjoyed it and hope to see you next time. Thanks for joining.